Politics and religion can be a lot like marketing. In the retail world, advertising works to convince you that you have a problem that their product can solve. Just think about the products that are on your bathroom counter. You have soap that you usually use to wash your body, but when a guy wants to shave, he's supposed to use another kind of soap for shaving, when in fact, soap is soap. After you bathe using soap, probably scented shampoo, maybe a scented conditioner, you then apply deodorant to your underarms as if you need to somehow mask the smell of soap. And the marketplace has persuaded us through the years of advertising, after we have shampooed with one sweet-smelling soap, shaved with another, washed our bodies with a different aroma of perfumed soap, then another sweet-smelling product on our underarms, we are then supposed to apply cologne or aftershave, ostensibly because that smell will drive women wild. We brush our teeth with sweet-smelling toothpaste, and then we're supposed to rinse our clean mouths with another minty product. They don't use this many chemicals to defoliate a jungle. And yet we have been taught these rituals, and I'm afraid that women may actually have more steps than men that oftentimes include shaving an even larger area than men do. But men will walk out of their houses smelling like a candy store. And they do so with no real reflection and may in fact make an emergency run to the drugstore to replace any one of these completely unnecessary products when they think they might be running low. Now, I know all of this. I've known all this for years. I managed to stop buying shaving soap, just shaving with soap. However, knowing that the only reason to use deodorant or cologne is if you have, for some completely unforgivable reason, failed to bathe that day, I still religiously and unnecessarily use most of these other products every day of my life. I do so unthinkingly, unconsciously, not thinking of the absurdity of it all until some store clerk who's standing 4 feet away from me says, "Man, you sure do smell good," which clearly needs to be interpreted as, "Wow, you smell like a French bordello," from several feet away. But of course, everyone's too nice to say that. If you pay attention to advertising, you can spot when they are trying to add another product line to your daily habits. Febreze can make your trash can smell like a rose garden, but it's garbage, and if it smells bad, shouldn't you take it out rather than spraying chemicals into your nostrils to deaden your ability to smell? Toilet paper commercials constantly seek to make you uncomfortable about your personal hygiene. And lately, there have been several attempts at trying to add a second regimen of sort of a wet wipes for adults, or a very elaborate toilet seat / car wash for your personal undercarriage so that you could feel better about yourselves. All of this has taken place within the span of a single lifetime. My dad said he was a grown man before he knew what the Sears Roebuck catalog was really for. You go back a couple of hundred years, and only one of these products was in the bathroom. Soap, just soap. Marketing is a powerful thing. It literally changes our perceptions of reality. It changes our perceptions of ourselves, our own bodies, our security to go out into society. We will believe things that have been consistently and successfully marketed to us, regardless of the evidence. I've known for 10 to 20 years that if you've used soap, you don't need deodorant and aftershave. I still use both. Religion is a part of this same scheme, has been for millennia. We tell people about heaven and hell from cradle to the grave, though there's not an ounce of evidence for either one. And while we spin these yarns of fear and greed and lust, we assure people that we, the church, the clergy, the priesthood, we're the only ones that can sell you divine fire insurance or give you a golden ticket for the train ride to heavenly bliss. It's like a spiritual deodorant stick. It keeps you from smelling bad while making you smell good, when in fact soap should have done the trick. Governments use marketing. Specifically, politicians use marketing to get elected and then to remain in power. After spending time in prison for his involvement in Watergate, John Ehrlichman now supports himself by writing quasi-pornographic novels. He was captured in a moment of unguarded honesty last year by a reporter who asked him about the Nixon administration's anti-drug policy. And he was just so matter-of-fact about it. Nixon had two primary enemies: the black leaders of the civil rights movement and the increasingly white middle-class protesters who were against the war in Vietnam. He knowingly lied to the American public to associate war protesters with marijuana and civil rights leaders with heroin. He then deeply criminalized both drugs in a wildly exaggerated way so that he could use those laws in order to raid the homes of, seize the property of, break up the meetings of, and send the leaders of to prison, both the civil rights and the anti-war movement. Ehrlichman concludes the interview saying, "Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Of course we did. 45 years ago. This is not Stalin's Russia. This is not Mao's China. This is America, sweet land of liberty, home of the free and the brave, the greatest democracy since ancient Greece." I hope you know that I take no pleasure in either rehearsing these facts or revealing them. But here is the naked, unavoidable, and painful truth. The government of the United States, in successive administrations, has lied to the population in order to gain their acquiescence to policies that result in the oppression and imprisoning of minorities and dissidents. Amen. They do this in many ways, but the most insidious and the most dishonest is about drug abuse. Now, let's be very honest about this. Heroin is a scourge. It's highly addictive, yet relatively cheap. It's an available drug that's killing tens of thousands of people in America now. More people died from overdoses of opioids last year than died from car crashes or gunshot wounds. If making it illegal and criminally charging those who manufacture, distribute, and use it would wipe it off the face of the earth, I would feel very differently. But we know for a fact that after 50 years of a war on drugs, we have failed entirely to put a dent in drug use. But our policies have ruined the lives of millions of people, cost us billions in tax dollars, and has almost single-handedly broken up minority families and kept sons and daughters of 19th century slaves locked up in chaos and in poverty. Now, I know that not all of you are going to agree with me, and I know that just saying it out loud in church would have guaranteed a rush to the exit in every other church I've ever worked for. But I adamantly favor the nationwide legalization of pot, and I do so knowing that it can be addictive and that it can turn productive people into basement-dwelling couch potatoes, and it increases traffic accidents. I know that. But I favor the legalization of pot because, all things considered, it seems to be less harmful and addictive than America's drug of choice, which is alcohol, and because in states where marijuana use has been made legal, It appears to reduce the rate of addiction and the frequency of death due to drug overdoses from harder drugs like heroin, cocaine, crack, and fentanyl. I could go on to talk about taxing and regulating the product and its medical benefits, but this is not my pro-pot sermon. This is my sermon about how the government of the United States for 50 years has used totally trumped up drug laws to incarcerate black people, to keep lots of unruly government critics on parole and on a felons list, and to trick the rest of us into accepting this monstrously unethical situation. Amen. The idea has been marketed to you that addiction is a crime. Perhaps more deeply, it's been marketed through the church as a sin. Drug use is something bad people do. And if you do it, you're a bad person, because no one makes them do it. They choose to do it. Most of us believe, in fact, that they could stop if they just wanted to. Or if they can't now, they could have before they fried their brains on all those drugs. What we know, and we know this based on math, I get so uncomfortable with people saying, well, I agree with this or I don't agree with that. You know, you can agree or not that the Beatles were the best band ever. You can't disagree that 2 and 2 is 4. There are things that are just true because of reality. And you may say reality is perception, but as Einstein said, it's a persistent one. Reality seems to stick with us somehow. Hard data, research shows that the USA, though it has the most strict criminalization of drug use, has the largest percentage of our population in prison and the highest percentage of drug use in the world. For example, Americans are 4 times more likely to use heroin than the next closest country, which is New Zealand. 16% of Americans have at least used cocaine once. Only 4% of the people in New Zealand, and most countries are way down in 1 and 2%. There are 4 European countries that have essentially decriminalized drug use, and while that doesn't fix the problem, each of those countries has seen a reduction in drug use. And you know, you look at some of the countries where they have decriminalized drug use and you think, well, it dropped drug use by 10%. But because of needle sharing in the illegal world, and then when it's no longer criminal and you can get clean needles, it has dropped the spread of HIV by 90%. It has dropped the rate of death from overdose by 70 or 80%. In the Netherlands, which has much more liberal policies than the USA, only about 2% of the population has ever tried cocaine, whereas in the USA, it's 8 times that many. So it really isn't about money. I mean, the Netherlands is a middle to upper middle class economic community, predominantly a white community. It isn't about money, and it isn't about race. It is apparently related, at least in large part, to incredibly stupid, indefensible, and cruel federal laws and a prison system for which a lot of people one day would go to hell if there was such a thing. Though the numbers of senselessly incarcerated people may make me reconsider my theology about that. I don't think there is a hell. Some days I just think there ought to be one. That's all I'm saying. Conservatives try to market to the public that drug use is a crime that deserves the most severe punishment. Bleeding heart liberals generally try to say that it's an issue of physiology, that people get hooked on the drugs and they can't help themselves, so it's a medical issue. And I'm not going to say that there's not support for either one of those positions. You know, anecdotal evidence abounds, and when you talk about the millions of people that have addiction problems, all of us know someone that we could anecdotally say fits in this category or fits in that category. Everybody knows someone who's an addict. But in the 1960s, scientists conducted these experiments on rats. And they put a rat in a cage with 2 water bottles. One bottle just had water, and the other bottle had water that was laced with either cocaine or heroin. And in virtually every case, The rat would keep going back to the drugged water, and they would take it until they died of an overdose. So, what did the scientists discover? Drugs are addictive, drugs are bad, and drugs will kill you. And that was the message that built federal policy. But about a decade later, a very clever researcher wondered if it might not be the drugs. He wondered if it might be the cage. So he repeated the experiment, but this time it wasn't one rat in a small cage. He created what he called Rat Park. Big space, lots of rats, several good things to eat, colored balls to play with, there was plenty of sex. And in Rat Park, there were 2 water bottles, one with water and the other with drugged water. And the rats tried both, but given a choice between good food, sex, playful friends, none of the rats became addicted or overdosed. In fact, they didn't like the drugged water. In fact, the same researchers pointed out that we have a human version of the rat in the cage experiment. We called it Vietnam. At one point, upwards of 10% of American soldiers stationed in a miserable jungle where they did not want to be and where they might be killed at any moment were using heroin. It was feared that when all of these soldiers came back home, that they would be roaming the streets as heroin addicts, which quite evidently simply did not happen. When they came home to family, jobs, school, they were no longer interested in heroin. They were not criminals. They were not physically addicted. They changed their cages. They went from a cage that made heroin look like a good choice to a cage where there were better choices. Now, I did my master's thesis on treatment of addiction, and I spent a lot of time in recovery groups where we talked about the progressive disease of addiction, in which addicts will lose their job and lose their family and lose their health if they didn't change their ways. And what we were less able to see was that a lot of the people didn't have a drug problem. They had a drug solution. They had already lost their family or lost their job or lost their health. And drugs or alcohol was the solution to the pain that they were in. A lot of how we have reacted to drug use in America has frankly depended upon race and class. We all know that Billie Holiday died from heroin addiction. But did you know that at the same time Billie Holiday was hooked on heroin that Judy Garland was too? Judy Garland's doctor told her to take longer vacations and spend more time with family and friends. Billie Holiday was put in jail and handcuffed to a bed. James Taylor was a heroin addict. Do you think of James Taylor as a criminal? Sweet baby James? Is it a weak-minded person who sang, "I've seen fire and I've seen rain"? But if James Taylor were black, he would be dead now. And that's race in America. Now, I know that a lot of you have heard a lot of this before. Some of you have heard me talk about it more than once. But you know what? I've known for 10 years that you only need to use deodorant and cologne if you don't bathe regularly, and I still get out of the shower and use both of them. And folks, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a fairly clever guy. And still, marketing makes me feel like I need to do something that I know good and well I don't need to do. So you know that addiction is not a crime. You know that. You know addiction is not a crime. And yet you live comfortably in a country with 1 million people in cages for using drugs. What do I have to say to create the discomfort necessary for us to change our prejudices towards addicts? This nation's Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, has directed prosecutors to reverse the more lenient approach to drug charges under the Obama administration and to seek maximum sentences for drug use, drug possession, and has even reversed the decision against using for-profit prisons in order to have more prison space. He has validated the use of for-profit prisons again. This has nothing to do with reducing drug use. It has nothing to do with reducing addiction or death from overdose. This has everything to do with increasing the prison population. It has to do with Jefferson Beauregard Sessions' racist hatred of brown and black people. He's not stupid. He knows what he's doing. He knows this doesn't work to help with the drug problem. He is just prejudiced and mean enough to put poor white people, black people, and brown people in prison so that there are more jobs for government employees, lawyers, judges, and more construction and service contracts for federal prisons and for-profit prisons. And if that doesn't make you angry, then there has to be a cold, hard place where your heart was supposed to be. 45 years ago, when Nixon turned Johnson's war on poverty into a war on the poor by jacking up laws to criminalize drug use, this nation was sold a lie. It was marketed to you, and you have it straight from the mouth of a Nixon administration advisor, John Ehrlichman, who said, "Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." If you didn't know about this before, you know about it now. So now what are you going to do about it?
Amen.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.